Egypt's red line. Can Cairo resist Israel's Gaza displacement plans amid energy dependence? Imagine a nation that calls displacement a historic crime and vows never to allow it, yet finds itself tethered to its neighbor by a 35 billion energy lifeline. This is Egypt, the Arab world's traditional mediator on Palestine, fiercely rejecting Israelis' proposals to expel Gazans, but quietly constrained by dependence on the Israeli gas. Hi, I'm Sina Exau, and this is Analytica Today. In August 2025, Egypt issued some of its harshest warnings yet against Israeli plans to forcibly resettle Palestinians from Gaza. Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati called the idea a one-way ticket that would erase the Palestinian cause, insisting Cairo would never permit such an act. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's government has portrayed displacement as a threat to Egypt's sovereignty and national security, stressing that it will not, under any circumstances, become party to such a crime. But Egypt's ability to act is complicated. As the humanitarian toll in Gaza mounts and ceasefire talks stall, Cairo must balance its role as a mediator with its deepening energy dependency on Israel, one that could limit how far its defiance can go. Egypt's warnings have grown sharper as the war drags on. Abdelati told CNN from Al Irish near the Rafah border that Cairo would neither accept nor facilitate any mass expulsion. "We will not accept it, we will not participate in it, and we will not allow it to happen," he declared, stressing that displacement could liquidate the Palestinian cause and destabilize Egypt's border. The statement reflects both moral conviction and hard security concerns. With over 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, a forced influx into the Sinai would transform Egypt's demography, invite insurgent threats, and risk unraveling the peace treaty with Israel. For Cairo, displacement is not simply a humanitarian concern. It is a direct national security threat. On the ground, Gaza's health ministry reports nearly 62,000 killed and over 155,000 wounded since October 2023. Hunger is accelerating in the crisis. 258 people, including 110 children, have already died from starvation and malnutrition. Aid convoys line up on the Egyptian side of Rafah with thousands of trucks stranded for weeks. Drivers describe waiting for arbitrary Israeli approvals, with shipments of food, baby formula, and even ICU beds often rejected despite pre-clearance. "Once you're here with your truck, you cannot leave," one driver said. Israel briefly reopened Kerem Shalom to allow aid in, while Egypt continues to send convoys through Rafah. Yet UNRWA has warned that replacing its distribution system with a US-Israeli mechanism would bring chaos and death, urging instead a return to a unified UN framework under international law. While Egypt resists displacement, Israel is preparing for escalation. Army Chief Herzi Halvai has approved plans to occupy Gaza City and central refugee camps, aiming to kill civilians by October 7. Hamas denounced the move as mass extermination. Ceasefire talks remain fragile. Egypt and Qatar are reportedly drafting a new framework, but Netanyahu insists any deal must involve the release of all hostages in one phase: Hamas's disarmament and continued Israeli control. Abdelati has dismissed Israelis' demand to disarm Hamas as impossible, given that 22 months of bombardment have failed to do so. Inside Israel, protests by hostage families have escalated into a general strike, demanding a prisoner swap. Netanyahu, however, warned that ending the war without dismantling Hamas could lead to a repeat of October 7. Earlier this month, Israeli energy giant NewMed announced a record $35 billion deal to supply Egypt until at least 2040, nearly tripling exports and cementing Cairo's reliance on Israel's energy. For Israel, it is a strategic triumph, binding the most populous Arab state into a gas network and reducing Cairo's ability to challenge its policies. For Egypt, it is born of desperation. Blackouts and shortages have made energy stability a political imperative. As Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli admitted, keeping the lights on is central to the region's survival. This dependency narrows Egypt's leverage. Cairo may warn against displacement, but it cannot afford a rupture that risks gas flows. In effect, its mediation role is now overshadowed by its vulnerability to Israel's energy dominance. Egypt's dilemma is evident in its diplomatic politics. Public anger is rising at the humanitarian suffering in Gaza. with Al-Azhar's Grand Imam briefly condemning the genocidal starvation before the statement was restructured under the state pressure. Public anger is rising at the humanitarian suffering in Gaza, with Al-Azhar's Grand Imam briefly condemning the genocidal starvation before the statement was retracted under state pressure. Protests abroad from The Hague to Tel Aviv have targeted Egyptian embassies for perceived complicity. Cairo has responded with narrative control, denouncing Hamas appeals and suppressing dissent at home. Yet Abdellaty insists diplomacy is still possible. Quote unquote, "We have a deal if we have political will." Hamas delegations continue to arrive in Cairo, and talks proceed with Qatar, the US, and Israel. But as Netanyahu resists concessions and Egypt remains tethered to Israeli gas, Cairo's red line is more rhetorical than enforceable. Egypt casts itself as the guardian of Palestinian rights, vowing never to allow displacement across its border. For Palestinians, this promise is existential. For Israel, it's a test of how far it can push for regional limits. And for Egypt, it's a paradox, a defiance constrained by dependency. As the war in Gaza grinds on, Cairo's role may be less about shaping outcomes than managing fallouts. Its red line stands firm in words, but whether Egypt can uphold it in practice depends on a fragile balance between humanitarian duty and energy security. I'm Sina Exau, and this has been Analytica Today.